Hi, and welcome to the Near Future podcast. This is episode 2 with Tom and Jonny. We are going to get straight into it. So, first of all, Tom, I would love to hear about the event that you ran yesterday, mostly working. Far away.
Yeah, let me tell you about it. So we had these are events. This is the fourth one we've run now. They're monthly-ish, and they are mostly for senior plus designers who are exploring AI in some capacity. So it's really a chance to get practical, hands-on, and get a sort of glimpse behind the curtain of what designers, practicing designers at leading companies are doing in incorporating AI into how they work and how their teams work. So yesterday featured James Storer, local London or UK consumer design extraordinaire. Worked at every consumer company I can think of in London, a consumer startup related company in London, and most recently has been at Monzo. He joined there 9 months ago as a staff product designer, and it was a great morning. Really interesting hearing his perspective on how he's building out AI infrastructure for prototyping at Monzo more broadly. I have a bunch of reflections around that, but a couple of things I wanted to call out today. And one was this interesting theme or reflection. He didn't really mention the word design that much. And I think this sort of relates to something else I've been talking with other leaders in companies and teams about recently, which is this idea of an internal stack rank of like, oh, the product managers are doing loads of stuff with AI, but designers further behind, or maybe designers much further ahead and products behind, or engineering's behind. Um, and there's kind of this interesting adversarial, competitive relationship between these different disciplines. But the thing that really came through very strongly with how James was talking about it is the team was less focused on what designers are responsible for and more about how to build bridges with other disciplines and focus on the outcomes that matter most to the business or to users and the artifacts that are kind of shared across different disciplines. So specifically, the wedge they were focusing on was around learning faster. So that wasn't at all related to shipping designs to production more quickly, although that's a common theme in the conversation around this. It was much more about how do we learn whether this is even the right direction as quickly as possible. So a lot of their experiments have been around doing things to accelerate or improve the quality of prototyping that helps guide more effective user research, helping product teams more broadly generate or create prototypes that will get concepts and ideas in front of users to test much faster, to lock in a direction that feels like there's more conviction behind it to move forward. So the theme I was reflecting on around that is the importance of language and focusing on the artifacts and the outcomes rather than like design does this or product does this. And I think that has a nice sort of side benefit of having some shared ownership of what is most important to the overall team rather than what is most important to designers or product managers or engineers. So
Really interesting.
yeah, that I think that was sort of like one really interesting piece of it, and I think the other that sort of ties into that is this idea of not trying to solve everything related to AI all at once, but being really specific about where is the highest leverage point right now. And for that team, it was really about that sort of initial learning loop and product discovery, rather than just trying to get something into production quicker, which on the surface, if you're looking at metrics of the amount of change that's being shipped to customers week by week, it probably doesn't move the needle that quickly. But there's all this foundational work and this foundational muscle building in how the team think about using AI that is long term this huge thing that is building up as an asset to the team. So I thought that was just quite liberating as well to not have to have this emphasis on like caring or directly forcing a translation between AI and shipping faster, but they're sort of building the muscle and the foundation across the team that puts a much more solid foundation in place so that when there's a bit more maturity around how things, workflows, tools for actually shipping to production, the team is really well positioned to take advantage of that and to establish standards and ways of working that are more in line with where the tool set is at that time. So yeah, a bunch of thoughts there.
Awesome. So it sounds like I've seen a little bit of James's tool. I wasn't at the event yesterday, but what you're describing is effectively no real goal around production ready code for this. It is pure exploration for, as you know, this is what designers have been doing forever, is exploring ideas, trying to validate, trying to get to something that feels good, that feels appropriate, that will work. And actually this is really just a way to bring that to life with the tools that we now have to bear. I was having a conversation with a director of design at a very fast growing company yesterday who was talking about building internal tools for themselves. And it made me start to think that maybe there are these, it's hard to bucket this stuff up, and it's messier than what I'm about to describe, but there are starting to be three clear use cases for where you would implement AI in a design workflow, and potentially reaches into product and research and engineering at the edges of this. But one is I can ship production code, and that might be bugs. I'm squashing bugs or like tweaking pixel alignment in the live product. There's what James I think is describing, which is this is just another tool in our toolkit to be able to prototype faster, to be able to put something higher fidelity in front of a user, or better describe what we want to the engineering team with no actual code handover. And then there's the sort of meta one, which is also interesting, which is what can we build for ourselves by way of tools that we then maintain and sort of have as something new in our toolkit that then will allow us to do all of the other things that we do better. So that might look like workflows for better research analysis, or tools to build like a mini Photoshop, but only using your brand colors and your assets for asset creation. There's all sorts of different things you can do within there as well. But it feels like in the last 6 months, as AI has crept into more of the product lifecycle outside the engineering organization, we can have a bit more of a nuanced conversation about what exactly we're using AI for. And it's not just use AI for design, full stop. It's appropriate here for our organization because we're Intercom and we want everyone to be able to ship production code, versus we don't do that here. Like, the engineers ship production code, but there's other interesting ways we can use AI as part of our workflow. It's interesting what you're saying also about design and product having a shared conversation and that tribalism breaking down. I suspect that will also be really culture dependent as well. We've definitely seen cultures where that wouldn't work as a duo in places in companies that we've partnered with. So there's all sorts of nuance and challenges and things like that. And I suppose maybe this is a big vote for like find your own path through it, rather than look at lots of Twitter posts and think that's what you should be doing. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. Although I do think I definitely support find your own path through it, but I like the idea of getting really crisp and precise about what is the most valuable place to start, the place that has where AI gives most leverage to teams and helps them try things out, test new ideas, and find enough value in just that step of the process, rather than trying to redesign the entire product development lifecycle from scratch, because I think that is very disruptive to a lot of teams, but it's also, there's so much evolving and moving quickly with design tooling and various other things that I think it's hard to completely overhaul things at this current moment in time. But I think there's a lot that can be done to target specific things that help build the experimentation and the muscle into things. But I think your point about culture is completely correct. And as someone who has previously spent time working at Monzo, I think there is a very strong culture that is very cross-disciplinary, cross-functional, and focused on impact and outcomes to the business and to customers. And that's not necessarily the same culture in every organization. So yeah, your mileage may vary there. There was maybe one slight a twist on that James mentioned, which is he built a bunch of prototyping tooling that sounded like it was sort of soft rolled out to the team and people could start playing with this stuff, but it wasn't forced on anyone. It wasn't mandated that everyone should use this, but enough people from enough disciplines found enough value in using it that that sort of pull started the momentum naturally. And I think there is something subtle there that's less about culture change across the specifics of an organization and more about change that people feel a part of and that they care about, or at least they can see the value for themselves before it's forced upon them, that I do think is maybe a more universal quality that I think is worth enabling in whichever approach feels right for the culture of your team.
Finding this low pressure state of play or exploration, and because there is this meta goal that exists more or less maybe within different organizations, which is get everyone comfortable so that when we do decide what we want, we don't have to cross that bridge. There's a base level of comfort with it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, it was super cool. It actually raised, it was sort of hinted at with James, but this led into other conversations I was having with other designers, other design leaders who were there afterwards, around the role of Figma in the design process and Figma as the source of truth. And I was kind of surprised that it feels like if you just read the internet, all design teams everywhere have migrated away from Figma and are now working in code all the time. But a consistent theme that I keep hearing is, yes, AI tools are really good for discovery and prototyping and trying out new ideas. But many teams who are even quite AI advanced are then taking the concepts that they've put in front of users and have some confidence behind, bringing those back into Figma and are spending days manually crafting interfaces that they can then hand over more easily with engineers. And I was kind of surprised that this was true in like early stage startups that have a single designer on the team through to much bigger companies that have a substantial design team. So as much as we've had advances in what AI makes possible, that handover point and that sort of source of truth of what is the real design remains, at least right now, still in Figma's world. But I'm curious about your perspective. There's obviously been a bunch of changes recently, or last week, I think, Figma rolled out their agent, which skipped code and allowed you to design straight into production, at least in theory. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds over the next 6 months as to whether Figma remains playing the role of source of truth or how much that's going to move toward code. Curious if you have any thoughts on that, Jonny.
Well, I have spicy opinions about Figma, and that come from, there are not Figma in any way Figma's fault, but just come from a more broad opinion, which is that these tools have overstretched themselves in terms of how much they want us to do within them, to the point of not being useful anymore. They're appropriate for exploration, which is where they started, and have now started to reach into full sort of production suite as well. And then you start to get to the source of truth being in the wrong place, which I do think is a problem. I actually do have a good anecdote, which I haven't told you yet, from a conversation this week, which is an organization with 90 designers. So big, decent sized design org. They put in place an automatic Figma seat cancellation if you don't open Figma for 30 days. So after 30 days, if you try and log into Figma, you'll find that your account no longer exists. And you then have to go and ask IT or whoever it is to get your seat back, and you have to justify it. And he said that in the last week, he had 12 of those requests. And that means sort of two things. I think that means, 12 designers out of 90. I mean, presumably some are already out of Figma by this point, but 12 designers out of 90 in any 1 week not having used Figma for 30 days when they are full-time designers at a company that values design. tells you something, but then the fact that they actually did want the seat back tells you something else. There is some need for what Figma offers very well. Is an excellent tool at a lot of things. But I wonder if some of those things that Figma does very well are moving out of the center of gravity, and the Figma is no longer the sun and tools revolve around it. It is becoming a tool that sits more at the fringe of your workflow, a little bit like, to be honest, Adobe has been for a very long time for me. I held an Adobe account for years because sometimes I needed to create something for a print job, or use Illustrator for some old file that I needed sometimes, like terrible reasons to be spending £100 a month on this software. And I've been free of Adobe for over a year now. I'm very proud of that. But you do start to wonder if Figma doesn't look like everyone suddenly switches and starts to just look like it becomes less important as part of a workflow, and then that annual renewal for Figma gets harder and harder to justify. So in that sense, it will be patchy. There'll be this organization that I spoke to is very far forward. I think they're working almost entirely in code as a design organization. Like that's where their center of gravity is. They're going to be in a massive minority at the moment. Most design orgs will be very much still in Figma, and in fact, a client of ours they are still Figma centric, even though we've been working with them on using code-based tools. It would be an enormous lift for them to do anything other than still base themselves in Figma for the near term. But it creeps along. And I remember opening Figma for the first time when we were all in Sketch and everyone was joking around, joining the same Figma file and messing up each other's designs and saying, why would anyone want this? So, I don't know when that will have been, 2015, 2016, maybe, but we're in the middle of a change again. And I think Figma need to move very fast with their agent stuff, or however they manage to work out how to stay essential. They need to stay essential, and their shipping cycle isn't massively fast on this stuff. They announced Make a year ago, and it's just about good now, I suppose. So they I don't envy the decisions they have to make now, but I do also have to disclose that I would love for us to not be so tied to Figma, or nothing personal to Figma, but those kind of tools over the medium term. So I'm maybe talking my book, as you say.
Just a counterpoint to that argument, I know Figma's valuation has increased by, I think, is it 40%? Don't quote me on these facts. So I remember something about 40% increase in some numbers that are important to the business recently, which seems to be in direct competition to the narrative of designers moving away from Figma. Curious if you have any theories about why that might be happening, or if that's a short-term blip, or if there is this bigger use case that may not be as obvious to product designers who are using Figma, or traditionally associated with the sort of core customer for Figma.
Yeah. I think they beat earnings. I think that was the thing that happened, but I'm not sure. Right. I don't have the detail, but yeah, I think two things can probably be true at the same time. I think they're probably doing well in the enterprise, and their customers are growing, and will undoubtedly be benefiting from that. I haven't looked into their financials. I suppose I could, but I think when you look at sort of generations of designers or generations of product teams, is the next generation committing to Figma when they don't have to? Maybe still are now, but will they be in a year's time? Hard to say. So I think that's where you sort of get to this disconnect between what the numbers look like within a business uh, and the future of that business. And maybe Figma is no longer a growth stock to hold. It's like a safe stock that they'll still do well for a while. But they're way down on their IPO price, but that's maybe not unusual.
Yeah. That's interesting. Hearing you talk about that made me think of the amount of people that maybe wouldn't classically consider themselves a designer, but have increasingly been doing design work through these AI tools and what they've made available. People using Claude Design and various other design tools that aren't classically Figma. And I'm kind of curious if there's a similar effect to when the smartphone introduced cameras and then everyone started becoming a photographer. And then I actually, when I first got my smartphone and back in the day and started taking pictures of things, I suddenly got a lot more interested in photography. And then I took this darkroom photography course and learned the mechanics of using like analog photography. And I kind of wonder if there's any sort of underlying themes of expanding the number of people who might consider themselves designers, and that having this long tail effect of actually Figma's audiences has increased massively because now there's all these like a much larger pool of people who might consider themselves now a designer, and therefore the audience is much larger, even if there are at the same time people moving away from Figma who are the sort of hardcore professionals that have spent the last 10 years in it day to day.
Yeah.
Don't know if
the photography analogy is really good because I think there were quite a lot of losers as smartphone cameras became good. You know, the traditional camera companies were big losers from people no longer needing to buy a personal camera just to take pictures at all. And then at the same time, the market for people taking pictures massively grew. So presumably there's winners. I mean, Apple presumably is a winner from that. You know, more people want a smartphone suddenly because it's got a good camera. And then maybe there's some also second and third order beneficiaries of like more people getting into photography to the point where they do buy a high-end camera, and maybe the sales of those go up. But I do think that that's possibly a good analogy, which is more people get into design, more people are able to design, the floor rises, and you know we get engineers and product managers and CEOs all you know being able to put together something coherent increasingly. And then the question is whether there's still a demand. I think there's still more of a demand for professional photographers than there were in the years before the smartphone. So I don't think that market has been damaged by the smartphone, is my understanding. And that may well still be true. There'll still be designers who are valued. I would hope so anyway. But that feels the tools, the winners and losers amongst the sort of companies that support that industry, who knows? Like it could still be Figma, but they shouldn't take it for granted. And you look at like Canva, which is much more of a tool that allows anyone to design and is much lower barrier to entry. Figma's quite complicated. You have to sort of know how auto layout works and like what all the different tool shortcuts are and what all the buttons do. It's a professional grade tool. So whether this new group of designers that are the equivalent of you sort of getting into it more would ever want anything that complex, or by then actually they're working in tandem with an agent, and maybe that's Figma's agent or maybe it's someone else's agent. It does feel like Figma going into agents puts them in competition with a lot of other companies that they weren't previously in competition with. So
it's true.
So
But I
that's
imagine
that.
I imagine the same is true from the other side, though. If Claude Design are coming out with a design tool, that seems also directly stepping onto Figma's turf. So
Yeah. The good thing for us as consumers is competition is great. It means we get innovation. It means we get fair pricing, etc., etc. So the net beneficiaries of all of this is not in a monopoly, which is what Figma has effectively had over interface design, but actually in the competition, which is forcing them to ship really interesting features. And whether those features are appropriate or enough is for the market to decide. But be fun to watch at the very
Yeah,
least.
yeah, definitely. I feel like you could listen back to this episode in a year, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see whether
Yeah,
the source of truth for these types of decisions lives at that stage. Because I could definitely see a world where Figma have cracked this challenge, and there is like a agentic and sort of code oriented layer to Figma that has managed to solve for this problem. And
yeah,
then I think Figma will be in a really strong position, but that's a big ask,
yeah.
and maybe one of these other AI native organizations will solve the design tool part of that
Mm.
code base instead. Don't know. Could go either way. Just check back
Is
in
that
a year and see how it is.
yeah? Is theirs to lose because it's very sticky. Like moving off
Yeah,
Figma is hard at
yeah,
scale. Um,
yeah,
yeah, we'll check back
yeah,
in. Note to self.
yeah. Um, okay. Should we move on to um, events? We have some events coming up.
Yeah, we do.
We have a bunch of stuff booked in. So you're giving a keynote or a presentation, a talk at Hatch conference in Berlin in September, which sounds super exciting. Do you want to give a flavor of what that talk will be about,
Yeah,
or is it too
and
early to go into details
no,
there?
no. I mean, I decided what it was called, the talk, which it's funny how these things, the tail can wag the dog sometimes, but the talk is called "The Tools That Shape Us," and I knew I wanted to talk about tools. It's very much what we've just been talking about, in a sense, and how this new diversity of tools and this choice that we're getting, we can build things in different ways. We can choose exactly how we're set up individually or as organizations around our design tools for the first time since forever. You know, engineers have had this that they can choose their exact stack. They can choose everything from their code editor through to the individual packages they put into their software, and everything about their developer experience they can design or build for themselves. Whereas as designers, we have been locked into these tools that we've been given an industry standard and proprietary. So in this world where we get to build our own tools, what does that mean for us? Do we have to become tool maintainers at this point? You know, who owns them, and how much do we really want that versus consistency across an industry? And then as we do shape our own tools, how does that impact our work and us as individuals? And so, I mean, the history is awash with examples of tools shaping tool users and all sorts of things. So I'm excited to put it together. I think it will be great fun for me to think through this and come up with a coherent narrative for 25 minutes. But yeah, it's in Berlin, 18th of September. There are still tickets, I think. And yeah, I'm on main stage at 2:30, and Paula Scher closes a couple of hours later on the same stage. So it's pretty good pinch me moment.
Yeah, yeah, big name. I'm sure that's going to be a fascinating talk as well.
Yeah,
Super
and
cool.
and then we also have, well, more in the very near future, probably before this even comes out. So by the time anyone listens to it or watches it, we'll have completed this. But we have a 15-minute build your own tool session at a Product Unleashed event in Shoreditch tomorrow, which is the 5th of June. I think there are still tickets for that as well, but we're running it twice. And Tom, what do you think? I mean, we've been planning this today. How do you feel about it?
I feel excited for it. I think it's one of the classic arc of agreeing to do something and being like, oh, that's like a fun idea, and then 24 hours beforehand, you're like, oh, we actually need to build this now. We actually need to make this good. But I feel pretty good. So I think the idea of actually building something and trying to do that live on stage is, I think, a really exciting idea, but have to pray to the Wi-Fi gods and the token gods. Make sure we don't use too much of our tokens beforehand. That would be a grave error to run into
Yeah.
live on stage. Um, but I also think there's something more exciting and cool about trying something from scratch on stage. And yeah, I feel good about it. We're going to be, I don't know if we should mention any spoilers about what we're planning to do, but I think I think the conversations we've had in planning it around how serious should it be versus how like fun and silly have been kind of interesting to think about, like what an audience at like 8-9 p.m. on a Friday night is interested in hearing about. Probably less on the serious end of things and more on the what's fun and engaging. So I think we're going to lean into that, and I think it's going to be a good test of how we improvise under those kind of constraints. But yeah, it's amazing to see. Even well, I'm kind of curious to see actually how people who are fairly new or even experienced with this building with AI already, whether this will feel like new territory for them. Like, oh, I hadn't really thought about the potential possibilities when you can actually make something usable in 15 minutes,
Mm.
versus whether it will whether 15 minutes is enough time to reach the point where it's like actually meaningful. Don't know.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think one thing that we learned very quickly when we started running trials of this week is 2 minutes of Claude thinking when you're on your own and you could read the internet or check your emails or whatever. 2 minutes feels like not a very long time. 2 minutes when you're imagining yourself on stage and you're all just watching Claude thinking feels like a very long time. So we really had to, I think we planned to do this before we really thought about what we would be doing in the gaps. Watching someone live build something for 15 minutes when they're working constantly throughout might be kind of entertaining. Watching Claude whir is less entertaining, I suspect, for people. So we've had to think about how to do crowd work and fill the void with interesting anecdotes and things to think about. So it's turned into a bit more of a talk than maybe I would have imagined at first, but I think it will be good. I actually think it will be interesting to see where we get to, and that means that even if we run out of tokens or the internet fails, then we'll be able to sort of get to the end, and it won't be like, well, everyone go and get a beer because we're done. And the dream is we get something live on a link by the end of the 15 minutes as well, so people get to walk away with it. And that has involved building some software as well, which is my favorite thing to do. So I'm in my happy place doing it.
Great. I feel like so I think we've both been asking Claude, like, do you have any tips for how to go faster in a setting
Yeah.
like this? And I feel like there's this interesting point of like, you can use a faster model. We're probably going to use Sonnet 4.6, and then you can use lower effort, which in theory would make it faster. But where is the line between like low enough effort that it's still like it's still sort of fairly decent-ish,
Yeah.
versus just like purely optimizing for speed, and it can be complete rubbish on stage or on
Or just
screen.
not work. It'll just build something that doesn't work, and
Yeah,
then you've got the most boring scenario, which is where you're debugging live. That's not
yeah,
what you want. So
yeah, yeah. So I think a few more test runs at like that effort level and getting that calibrated to something that feels right, feels important. But
yeah,
who knows? Who
yeah.
knows? It might fail completely, but hopefully someone will take something away from it, even if it does fail completely. And one other thing for this workshop is that it is all it's a preview of what is happening in September. So we're going to be running
Mm.
a full day workshop for Product Unleashed, which is an event happening in Brighton. In I think it's in September. I forget the exact date.
24th or 25th, one of those days.
Yeah. So oh yeah, of course, it's the week after Berlin. Yeah.
It is
Anyway,
indeed.
yeah. So I guess we can make it into a tour. We should fit in some other dates somewhere in between. I don't know where, Belgium or something.
Yeah,
Um,
we could do a tour poster. Always
yeah.
wanted to do. You've probably done tour posters already, Tom, but I've never done one.
Yeah. I have, and it was my favorite, probably my favorite part of my that sort of poster design phase of my life.
Yeah,
Um, So yeah, maybe there's a chance to do that. Maybe we should find some other companies or events that are interested in doing stuff together in Berlin, London, Brighton. So if you're listening to this and you run a company that wants people to come and do things, let us know. But anyway, the event tomorrow is a preview of what's happening in September. So the event, which we have yet to firm up the full content of what that workshop is going to be like. It will be building on and inspired by a similar theme of helping people um, build with AI, senior designers, design leaders, building with AI to make meaningful, useful changes to how they're operating and really amplifying what they're capable of doing.
Yeah. Well, while keeping the joy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Keeping the joy, keeping the fun. That is definitely
Absolutely.
important. So I think that we're probably coming up to the end of our recording time. Is there anything else that you've been thinking about or building recently that you wanted to share, Jonny?
Yeah, well, I'm building something and it's not quite ready for prime time yet, but I am quite excited about it. I've through conversations over the last probably 6 months with design teams, I think we've seen that one of the real pain points, not just design teams, but more broadly non-engineering teams, one of the pain points is actually publishing stuff and getting it live. And we've got at least two, maybe more examples of scaled design organizations where Vercel and Netlify have been banned across the board because people build something in localhost and then they're like, I need to share it with someone, and they'll just like set up a personal Vercel account, and then that prototype will live live on the internet forever and ever, way after they've left the business or way after it should be on the internet. It's built for one user test the next day, found 10 years later on your personal Vercel account isn't ideal. So it feels sort of unsolved. And as an extension of that, even being able to run code in a cloud environment, not locally, feels beneficial. So I've been building something in that space. I'm hoping that we get to test it tomorrow at this event. It's consumed a lot of my time, actually more on the infrastructure side, more than the design side. So I sort of feel like I've done the anti-designer thing of building something that's a complete mess to look at and then hoping I can clear it up at the end. Claude has made way too many of the design decisions so far, so I need to clear all that up. But excited to get something out and see what people think of it. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks. The other thing I've been building is we've finally decided to get serious about how we run processes at Near Future, and so I've been building a CRM entirely in Notion, and I think it's pretty good. We'll see. We'll see if it scales as we get deeper into our sort of new business process and pipeline and things. How about you, Tom?
Yeah. Both good examples there. Well, the one thing I've been thinking about but haven't actually done. I was away on holiday last week, and a good chance to disconnect and to not be on my laptop at all. I didn't take my laptop with me, but I still was thinking about AI and what is relevant, what is useful today, and something that I used to do before having kids, and now I have two young kids and feel like less time for this on holiday. But I used to maybe write a journal while I was away. Maybe it's throughout the course of the time away or every day of like what we got up to, what we did. Didn't have the energy for that this time round, but I was thinking about the idea of coming home from a holiday and putting like your phone in the middle of a table with voice transcription on, maybe Granola or Notion AI notes or something, and then just asking everyone what their favorite part of the trip was or what their favorite memories, maybe even showing some photos of different things and asking like basically having a conversation as a family around the table of like what were the best parts of this trip for you or the most memorable parts, and then turning that transcription into something that like maybe packaging it up in a book or something that you can like revisit in a year or two. And I feel like it's like I like the idea of it. And I tried to do it, but then I realized my kids are 5 and 2, and so the 2-year-old can't speak properly, or he can barely speak. And the 5-year-old, every time I sort of got to a point where I was maybe like, oh, maybe now's the right time to do this, he was too hungry or too tired or to something else that it just wouldn't have led anywhere good. So
Yeah.
it's a concept that might work
Give
for
it
people with
5 years.
older kids or maybe no kids at all, as a way of just like, I don't know, the idea of like focusing the interaction about like actually just sharing memories together.
Yeah.
But a byproduct of that is recording that transcription and then feeding that into something that has this sort of shared document of the most memorable parts of that trip. Could be fun.
Mm.
So again, if you're listening to this and about to go away on holiday somewhere or just come back from holiday and you think this might work, would love for you to try it out and tell me if this actually was a terrible idea or not. Yeah, there's something about that interaction with like knowing that you're being transcribed that probably changes the dynamics of what you would say. But at the same time, you're not going to get everyone to individually write a journal and then collate that together. It's like no one wants to do that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something fun there.
I like it as a granola conversation. The problem with young kids is planning is futile, isn't it? So that conversation will
Yeah.
happen, but it'll be in the car while there's background noise and snacks, and it's not going to be a structured conversation. It's going to be, well, at least if your two are anything like mine, it'll be some random blurted out statement at some point in the future that you don't capture. But
Yes, exactly. Or there's just like very strong recency bias or like toy
yeah,
bias. Like we, we actually we did get McDonald's on the way home from the airport when we landed back in London, and immediately after that, I asked my 5-year-old what was your favorite part of the trip, and he said getting the toy from McDonald's on the way home. So
could have been a
so
cheaper holiday. Yeah.
yeah, could have didn't need to go all the way to Portugal for that.
Hopefully you're nice and rested and ready to vibe code some design tools with me tomorrow.
Yeah, I feel maybe not rested, but I feel ready to vibe code some design tools, and yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Um, yeah, should we
Right,
wrap
well,
there?
that's it. Is that it?
I
We
think
got
that's
to the
it.
bottom of all of our ideas for today, so I think we should call it. Thank you, anyone that has made it to the end, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you soon.